This marks the ninth and final part of Charlie's story. I sincerely hope you have been blessed by it, and thank you for listening.
Intercessory Prayer, Saturday, March 31st, 2018. March 30th, 2018 was Good Friday. Charlie and his family attended the Tenebrae service at Heartland Community Church that evening. On the drive home from the service, Charlie reflected on the importance of the service. "You know, Claire," Charlie began, "I have always enjoyed the Good Friday services at our church. I can't explain it, but for some reason, this one felt special. It was like God was speaking to me at a different level." "I felt it too," Claire responded. "I don't have a clue what that means either. You and I have trusted God throughout our marriage, and even though our faith has been challenged over the past few years, we are still standing there, in the darkness, looking up to Jesus on that cross. I love you." With a temperature in the mid-50s Saturday morning, Charlie decided to take Blackjack and Bandit to his favorite spot on the hill near his home. As he sat down, he opened his Bible to the book of Luke and walked through Luke's account of the crucifixion. Charlie reflected on the incredible cruelty, pain, and humiliation that Jesus was going through on his way to the cross as he spoke to his longtime friend. "You know, Bandit, it is hard to imagine the level of hate that made the people, the religious leaders, and the Roman authorities want to do this to Jesus. But Satan blinded the hearts of those people. It would not allow them to see him for who he is. When you hear Jesus say, 'Forgive them, Father, for they do not know what they are doing,' Jesus is telling us that they were blinded to the truth. Even in the intense pain of that moment, Jesus was willing to forgive all of them. Of course, that's precisely the reason he went to the cross. He paid the price for my sin." Charlie bowed his head and prayed. "Lord, Brother Dove reminded me that I should pray for my friends. First, I'm asking that you forgive me for getting so angry with them. God, Billy, Elliot, and Zach are somewhat like the people who put Jesus on the cross. They thought they were doing the right thing. More than that, Lord," Charlie continued, "if any of them have never truly turned their life over to you, my prayer is that you will bring people and circumstances into their lives to make that happen. We don't have to agree on every detail, but I would like to see my friends in your presence when this journey is finished. Thank you for hearing my prayer, and thank you that you have made me a promise never to leave me, even when I try to wander off. Amen." Transformation, Sunday afternoon, April 8th, 2018. "Charlie, Elliot is on the phone," Claire reported. "He said he would be in town later this afternoon and wants to know if he can stop by for a bit. Do you feel like talking to him?" "Tell him to come on now," Charlie answered. "I think I'm in a much better place now. I know he meant well. He is still a friend." The temperature was in the low 40s, and light rain had fallen for much of the day. Charlie had spent most of the afternoon working on the business side of the ranch. He still needed a plan to deal with the bank's deadline. He had no way of knowing that Elliot was not just in town for the day. Elliot had a specific purpose for his 4-hour drive to Charlie's ranch. When Elliot arrived, the two men went to the back porch and sat by the space heater between the rockets. "Are you comfortable out here, Elliot? We can go inside if you prefer." "No, it's actually pretty nice out here," Elliot responded. "Charlie, we haven't spoken since we took you to the hospital a few weeks ago. I wanted to check on you. I was feeling pretty guilty. I pushed you so hard, "Let it go, Elliot," Charlie interrupted. "You were trying to help." "Claire told me you went back into the hospital a couple of weeks later," Elliot responded. "Charlie, is there a long-term prognosis for this disease?" "The long-term prospects for this are anybody's guess," Charlie answered. "A lot of factors come into play. Things like diet, exercise, lack of fluids, stress, heat, cold, and Some other stuff I don't understand can play a role in the length and severity. If I can make sense of the doctor's instructions, I might do better. In the end, I am in God's hands. Charlie, I came here to ask your forgiveness, Elliot began. I've already told you. There's no need for that, Charlie pushed back. Charlie, I grew up in a church that taught us that God blesses those who do good works. Health and wealth are the result of a man's righteousness. If you have enough faith, you can move mountains. I started to think about some of the things you were saying, and it challenged my own beliefs about God. I told one of my friends back home about what you were going through. I told him some of what I believed. He challenged me and invited me to his church. That was 2 weeks ago. We went to Eaton Oaks Presbyterian, and I had a chance to listen to Pastor Rick. His sermon was on John 9. That was where Jesus healed the blind man. His disciples asked Jesus if the man was being judged for his own sin or the sins of his parents. That hit pretty close to home. I thought about my words to you. Jesus told them that neither had sinned, Charlie responded. God had a greater purpose, and that was to use the man's blindness to display God's work in him. That pretty much summed it up, Charlie, Elliot answered. I was pretty confused, so I called Pastor Rick and asked him to meet with me. We ended up meeting 3 times that week. I asked him a ton of questions. Charlie chuckled. I know the feeling. We talked a lot about the trials that the Apostle Paul went through. Paul had this thorn in his flesh, and God would not heal it, even though Paul had prayed really hard about it. Charlie, I never heard that story in my church growing up. In Philippians, Paul talked about what a blessing it was to suffer for Christ, Elliot continued. In another passage, he said that he had suffered the loss of everything, but counted it all as rubbish compared to his relationship with Christ. Charlie, I still don't have any answers to your trials, Elliot continued, but I am certain that the answers I shoved down your throat were all wrong, right down to the very last word. Elliot, we are friends, Charlie responded. I too have been searching for answers. My search has brought me closer to God than I have ever been at any point in my life. You see, that's another thing, Elliot interrupted. I heard this guy, Charles Stanley, on the radio. He said that adversity is a bridge to a deeper relationship with Jesus, and that bridge can take you to a place of indescribable intimacy with Jesus Christ. Pastor Rick gave me a copy of this little magazine. Elliot pulled out a crumpled up copy of Table Talk magazine and began reading. When hard providences of God come our way, our first temptation is to think that these problems are evidence that God is not good, not present, or both. Nothing could be further from the truth. Throughout Scripture, we see God's servants tested with the most grievous circumstances. We need to look no further than the book of Job, where we meet that righteous man, and within a chapter, he has lost everything. Then he laments and pours out his heart to God for the better part of some 35 chapters. The fact that God included a book such as Job in his sacred word tells us something about him. It tells us, first of all, that the suffering we endure never happens apart from God's inscrutable arrangement of our lives. Hardships are neither random nor pointless. Second, the book of Job reminds us that God hears the cries of his hurting children, even if he does not fully reveal his reasons for their difficulties. Therefore, adversity, so far from being evidence of God's absence, is expected and typical in this present evil age. Jesus summarized the Bible's teaching on this subject well when he said, "In the world, you will have tribulation." John chapter 16, verse 33. Charlie, this guy is telling us that all of the hardships we experience in life are part of God's plan. Every one of them, Elliot concluded. I grew up believing that if you join the church and do good things, all of your problems will go away. Giving money to the church would obligate God to give you more money. They called it a seed that demonstrated our faith. Elliot, Charlie answered, I too have been meeting with a dear friend and pastor over the past few weeks. He has been taking me through a description of God's unsearchable wisdom and majesty. Some of the things we experience in life are beyond human comprehension. Sometimes God heals our infirmities. Sometimes He will materially prosper the work of our hands. Sometimes He will take us in the opposite direction. He is infinitely wise, and He knows where He is taking us, even when we try to resist. I have an old book by Jerry Bridges, Charlie continued. It was entitled, Trust in God, Even When Life Hurts. He talks about the sovereignty of God. One of the things he teaches is that, for the believer, all of the pain and adversity in life is profitable. Sometimes it seems senseless and irrational, but in the end, God uses it for our profit and for His glory. Charlie, Elliot continued, there is so much that I need to learn about Christ. I don't even know where to start. Pastor Rick started asking me some very personal questions. I started to get uncomfortable, but I stuck with him. The guy asked me if I died tonight, Elliot continued, did I know for certain that I would go to heaven? I can't remember where it is in the Bible, but it says something like, I write these things so you may know you have eternal life. 1 John chapter 5, Charlie responded. We have the assurance of salvation if we truly place our faith and trust in Jesus Christ. The interesting thing about that verse, Charlie continued, is that the very next verse is one a lot of people use to claim that God has promised to fulfill all of our wishes, wants, and desires. And this is the confidence that we have toward Him, that if we ask anything according to His will, He hears us. And if we know that He hears us in whatever we ask, we know that we have the requests that we have asked of Him. 1 John chapter 5, verses 14 and 15. The part of the verse that a lot of people miss is the part about submitting to God's will. That is part of what I myself have been wrestling with. If my heart is truly aligned with His, I will want His will to be done. He is perfect. He is perfectly wise. He created the entire universe with its intricate design. He can certainly handle my disease, and He will be the one who decides whether we keep this ranch or not. There's nothing easy about surrendering to God's will. We are like children begging for candy. We don't care about diabetes or tooth decay. Like some guy said, I want what I want when I want it, and I want it now. What kind of loving father will give us everything his child demands? As I said, Elliot answered, there is so much I don't know. I talked to you like I had all of the answers. In reality, I was the one who needed to keep my mouth shut. Elliot, my friend, Charlie answered, you spoke out of a sincere desire to help. I can't fault you for that. I really believe the things I said, Elliot answered. My so-called faith was rooted in the belief that if we do all the right things, God was here to reward us. Rick set me straight, Elliot continued. My salvation is based on the work of Christ alone. We are saved by God's grace alone and because of what Christ did on the cross. Rick used a verse that said that salvation is a gift of God, not of works, so that none of us have a reason to boast. Ephesians chapter 2, verses 8 and 9, Charlie answered. Yeah, that one, Elliot continued. Charlie, I came here today for two reasons. The first was to ask for your forgiveness. The second is to tell you that, after meeting with Rick, I realized that I had never truly turned my life and heart over to Christ. Our weekend at Cricket's Creek led me to an encounter with a real preacher of the gospel, and he, in turn, led me to surrender myself to the Lord. Wow, Charlie responded. That is incredible. For a long time, I had assumed that you were a believer. I just figured we had a few differences in our beliefs. No, Elliot responded. I didn't realize it, but I never had a true faith. I had some head knowledge from a few selected Bible verses, but never a true faith in Christ. I am determined to learn and grow. Rick has set me up with a group of men who meet for Bible study each week. I am sorry for what I did to you, but I am excited about the new life God has planned for me. I am too, Elliot, Charlie answered. The past few weeks have been eye-opening for both of us. I promise you this, I will pray for you to continue to grow in your faith. Speaking of prayer, Elliot responded, at our first meeting, these men were asking for prayer requests, and I told them about you. I hope that's all right. Thanks. I can use all the prayers I can get, Charlie answered. Has anything changed, Charlie? Elliot asked. From the looks of your eye, the psoriasis thing is still there. I mostly need prayer for Claire, Charlie answered. She's a pretty strong woman, but I have made too many trips to the hospital. We have 5 kids to take care of, along with a ranch that requires work. I know she is worried. What about the bank? Elliot inquired. We have had a pretty good year, and beef prices are up, Charlie answered. We were looking for a way to sell enough cattle to satisfy the bank without hurting us in the longer term. God provided a way. Our friends at the Potawatomi tribe presented us with a generous gift last week that will enable us to move forward. We still have a lot of hard work ahead of us, Charlie continued. Our financial stresses will still be there. It is so encouraging to see that God is executing His plan for our lives. So, you think God's plan is for you to rebuild the ranch? Elliot asked. Not necessarily. I certainly hope so, Charlie answered. But God has walked us through the next step in our journey. We can be certain that there are more battles ahead of us. The next time we hit a pothole, I hope and pray that I will look to Him first. God hasn't promised you success, Elliot surmised, but He has certainly shown His presence in your life. Charlie, you are a very blessed man. I'm glad I came today. I really appreciate talking to you. Elliot wrapped up the conversation. I have an appointment tomorrow, so I need to get on the road back home. That's a long drive, Elliot, Charlie offered. You are more than welcome to stay here for the night. Get some rest and drive back in the morning. Thanks, Charlie. Elliot declined the offer. But I really need to get an early start for tomorrow. I really want us to stay in touch. If there's anything I can do for you guys, please call me. I truly mean that. As Elliot drove away, Charlie put his arm around Claire and asked her to join him in his prayer. Father, I thank you for having a friend like Elliot. Forgive me for getting so mad with him. Thank you for using a difficult conversation to bring him to salvation. But also, thank you for using him to push me into your arms. You worked all of this together like a puzzle that my simple mind cannot comprehend. Amen. Auction Day, Thursday, April 19th, 2018. Claire and Charlie were regular and consistent visitors to the Lone Wolf Ranch and were glad to respond to Rita's needs in every way they could. A large livestock auction was scheduled for Friday, April 27th. Although Jack had employed some good men to help take care of their ranch, none of them had the experience to manage the business side of ranch operations, and Rita was still grieving the death of her husband from a little over 2 months ago. She was looking for Charlie to help her take advantage of the auction. Ben Archer had served as the foreman for Jack and Rita for more than 20 years. He was well organized, and the other men responded very well to his leadership. Rita, Charlie began, I know this is a difficult time for you. There's an auction coming up next week, and Ben is telling me you have a pretty good number of cows that are ready for auction. You don't have to participate if you don't want to, but if you do, we are here to help. What do you think? Rita responded. I need to take advantage of this opportunity, Charlie answered. But our circumstances are different from yours, and we don't have as many cows to deal with as you will. It's really your call. I'm just here to offer my help. Charlie, Rita answered, it's really your decision, too. Do what you think is best. Ben will work with you. As a matter of fact, he can probably help with your cattle as well. Why don't I have a chat with Ben? Charlie offered. It's really your decision, too? Strange choice of words, Charlie thought to himself as he headed out to the pasture where Ben was working. She's probably not thinking clearly now. Ben greeted Charlie as he drove up on the UTV. Hey, Charlie. Welcome to my office. Hey, Ben. I just finished talking with Rita, Charlie began. Let me guess, Ben responded. You are looking to take advantage of next week's auction. You guessed it, Charlie answered. I've already told Mrs. Graham that we probably needed to take advantage of it, but the timing is pretty difficult for her. Charlie, if you are thinking of tag teaming this auction with your ranch, the boys and I will do anything you ask. To tell the truth, Charlie answered, it's a bit emotional for me as well. This is Jack's herd. That makes it personal for me. If you're willing, would you join me in taking the lead for the entire project? You got it, partner, Ben answered. Let's get all the men together and get this show on the road. While Jack's herd was considerably larger than his, Charlie was able to take advantage of the labor and trucks needed to move the cattle to the auction. Beef prices were up, and that benefited both ranches. Arriving at the auction, Charlie, Rita, and Claire found a quiet place beneath an old oak tree, and Charlie said a prayer for the auction results. Lord, I won't pray for a good price on this sale. I don't have the wisdom to know what is best for all of us, but you do. In our human wisdom, we have tried to make the right decisions to meet our financial needs and still be able to sustain the ranch for the long haul. Lord, in Christ's name I pray. Claire noticed the fatigue in Charlie's voice. Charlie, you have worked so hard over this past week. Why don't you let Ben and the boys take the lead from this point on? I know. Charlie's voice was shaking. We have so much riding on this auction, but another hospital visit wouldn't help anything either. As the totals came in, Charlie was very pleased with the results. The money raised would clear the remainder of their bank obligation and still leave enough of the herd to continue building the ranch. Charlie, Rita spoke up, let's use some of the proceeds to make some improvements at Shiloh and get you some additional help. Charlie was startled at the offer. Rita, we benefited quite a bit from Ben and your boys. I just appreciate you allowing us to ride along with you. Claire and I love you, and we want to help you wherever we can. Rita seemed a bit confused by Charlie's rejection of the offer. When they returned to Shiloh, Claire turned to Charlie. That was a generous offer from Rita. She seems to really appreciate your help with their operation. Incident at Crickett's Creek. Sunday afternoon, April 29th, 2018. Charlie was still feeling encouraged following the auction from 2 days earlier. At Claire's insistence, he avoided excessive physical exertion, and he no longer felt like a hospital visit was imminent. Pastor Pete's morning sermon was from John 9, where Jesus healed the man who had been blind from birth. I'm going to take Blackjack and Bandit for a ride around the property, he told Claire. Nothing strenuous. I just want to survey what we have and take inventory of things that might need attending. If you promise to take it easy. Claire's response was firm and instructive. Yes, ma'am, Charlie laughed. Charlie's ride took him to the family cemetery on the hill, where he dismounted Blackjack and took his seat on the stone bench next to Bandit. Father, I am so grateful that everyone buried in this plot is safely home with you. No one can know another person's heart, but I remember the day when Grandpa Slim gave his heart to you. I witnessed the faith of my dad as he demonstrated it in his life. I saw each of my children as, one by one, they accepted you as Lord and Savior. Lord, it's still hard not having them here with me. As Charlie stood up, he had to steady himself. Bandit, I must have stood up too fast. I got a little dizzy for a moment there. Charlie mounted Blackjack and continued his ride down the hill, eventually reaching Cricket's Creek. He came upon the circle of rocks that framed the fire pit where Charlie's friends had pushed so hard a few months before. The site was undisturbed. It was around 4:00 p.m. when Charlie dismounted Blackjack and made his way down to the side of the creek. He and Bandit sat quietly together by the side of the creek. Today, there was no hawk to entertain them. There was just the quiet gurgling sound of the waters rolling over the rocks in the water below. Charlie had an inexplicable sense of peace. Bandit, can you feel it, boy? Something special is going on, and I can't describe it. God's righteous right hand is on my shoulder. I haven't felt this kind of peace in a very long time. Charlie took Blackjack by the reins and slowly walked along the shore of Cricket's Creek, enjoying the peace and taking in the view. Without warning, Blackjack was startled at the sound of a timber rattling near the creek's path. Caught off guard and still holding the reins, Charlie stumbled forward on the creek bank and landed face down in the cold water. His head struck one of the rocks near the edge of the creek, leaving him semi-conscious and bleeding from his forehead. Charlie managed to pull himself over to the edge of the bank, where he lost consciousness, with half of his body still partially submerged in the cold water. "That's cold," Charlie whispered, just before losing consciousness. The air temperature at that hour was a comfortable 64 degrees, but the water in Cricket's Creek was still averaging around 40 degrees. Perfect for trout fishing, but hazardous for the human body. With nearly 3/4 of Charlie's body partially submerged, Charlie was facing the high probability of hypothermia within a short period of time. The cold water soaked into Charlie's clothing, and his body's core temperature began falling. Blackjack settled a few yards away as Bandit ran back and forth along the creek bank, barking and whimpering to try to get Charlie's attention. After nearly more than an hour in the cold water, Charlie began to slowly regain consciousness, but had almost no upper body strength. Back at the house, Brother Doug had stopped by to check on Charlie. "Brother Doug?" Claire offered. "Charlie took Blackjack for a ride this afternoon. I can't get him on his phone." That's not unusual for Charlie. Still, it's getting late, and I'm a little worried. "Why don't we take a ride out and check on him?" Brother Doug answered. At that, Claire and Doug took the Kawasaki mule and headed out. In addition to a few work tools, the mule was also equipped with a complete first aid kit, a couple of towels, and a small blanket. Claire continued to call Charlie's cell phone, hoping that he might answer. Claire took a route that would take them by the 4 or 5 places where Charlie usually stopped to rest. Their final stop was at Cricket's Creek at the back of the property. Topping the hill overlooking the creek, they spotted Blackjack standing alone, and Claire immediately knew something was wrong. As they approached the creek, Bandit came up to meet them and took them back to Charlie lying in the water. He was semi-conscious, and his breathing was labored. He had a cut on the head that had resulted from his fall. Claire went knee-deep into the water, and, slipping her hand under Charlie's neck, she managed to pull him a little farther up on the muddy bank. Even though he was nearly 90 years old, Brother Doug was in pretty good physical shape. Grabbing a rope from the mule, he and Claire managed to slip the rope under Charlie's arms and use the winch to move him up to dry ground. Claire worked to get Charlie out of his wet clothes and wrapped him up in the towels and small blanket they had with them. As Claire wiped the mud from Charlie's face and arms, she noticed the redness of his skin. "Doug, we've got to get him to a hospital." Wamego Hospital. Wamego Hospital, April 30th, 2018, Monday. Charlie was in the hospital when he regained consciousness. He was weak and suffering from some mental confusion. The hospital staff did not complete their test until after 2:00 p.m. They found no lingering complications from the fall, but he was clearly feeling the effects of hypothermia. "How do you feel, Charlie?" Dr. Bogan asked. "Ready to go home?" Charlie responded. "Doc, I certainly understand why you want me to be careful, but other than this headache, I really feel pretty good." "You were in the cold water long enough to have died from hypothermia, Charlie. How's the itch?" the doctor asked. "You know what?" Charlie answered. "I haven't thought much about it. My skin is red, but I really haven't itched very much. Maybe the cold water killed this frustrating disease." Charlie laughed. "Wouldn't that be something?" "I wouldn't count on it," Dr. Bogan responded. "But you don't have as much plaque and lesions as I've seen on you before. Let's enjoy the relief while it lasts." "Doc, I noticed," Claire interrupted, "when I was wiping the mud off of Charlie, and later when I was bathing him, I was finding a lot of what looked like dead skin on the towels I was using." "That was probably some of the plaque," Doc Bogan answered, "although I'm not sure what could have caused it. I am more concerned about the stress from the fall. That can exacerbate the symptoms of his disease. Charlie, I can't find reason to keep you here, so I'm going to let you out of this joint," the doctor continued. "But we need to continue monitoring your temperature. I will be especially careful to note any fever, chills, or changes in your heart rate. I want to continue using that topical cream that I prescribed for you before. That will probably help with the skin irritations," Doc Bogan concluded. "If you don't have any questions, I'll tell them to let you go home." Letter from Austin, May 4th, 2018, Friday afternoon. It was Friday, just 4 days after Charlie was released from the hospital. The redness in Charlie's skin was beginning to fade. As Charlie concluded his day's work, Claire met him at the back door. "Hey, babe," she began. "How do you feel?" "I actually had a great day." Charlie was pretty upbeat. "I'm sure it's only temporary, but it feels good not having to scratch and claw myself all day long. I'm thinking, when this stuff comes back, I might just go down to Cricket's Creek and submerge myself for a couple of hours." Charlie laughed. "Worth a try anyway." Claire laughed. "By the way, you have a letter from Austin, Texas," Claire continued. "Zach?" Charlie chuckled sarcastically. "I wonder what words of wisdom he has cooked up for me this time." "Now, Charlie," Claire answered, "you said yourself they meant no harm. They were only trying to help. It's only been 2 months since they were here." "Let's grab a glass of lemonade and sit out on the patio and read what he has to say," Charlie suggested as he opened the envelope and began to read aloud. "Dear Charlie, I really appreciate the time we spent together on your ranch back in February. You and Claire really treated us well. If you're willing, I hope we can make a follow-up trip later in the summer. Charlie, I can't speak for Elliot and Billy, but I have a lot of regrets for the things I said to you. I was way out of line. A true friend would have stood by your side in support. You didn't need a jackass friend to come to your house like he had all the answers. For that, I am deeply sorry. I hope you will forgive me. The real truth is that my life has been a train wreck for several years. I don't have it all together. My marriage is on life support, and my son won't have anything to do with me. I do have a good job and a good salary here at UT, but I really wish I had your outlook on life. Even in your pain, you have a great marriage, and your relationship with God is important to you. Charlie, if I had been through the things you've endured, I doubt that I would have wrestled with God. My faith is so weak, I probably would have just walked away and said, to hell with it all. I truly wanted to help, but more than that, I wanted to prove to you that I had all the answers. That was nothing more than a smokescreen and a load of crap. I want to finish by telling you that I've been talking with a fellow staff member here. He has endured some trials in his own life, but he has a strong relationship with the Lord. and a different perspective on trials in the life of a faithful Christian. I've been visiting his church for the past 6 weeks. His pastor's name is Tom Brooks, and he has been teaching a series on suffering and the sovereignty of God that has been eye-opening for me. Charlie, I hope you can forgive me. Your friend, Zach. It appears that Zach has had a change in his theology, Claire observed. That's encouraging, Charlie answered. I will try to give him a call tomorrow. A few short moments after reading Zach's letter, the phone rang, and Claire answered. Holding her hand over the phone, she turned to Charlie. Ironic timing. This is Billy from San Diego. Do you want to talk to him? Charlie shrugged. Sure. Taking the phone from Claire, he answered the call. Hey, Billy, what's up? Billy told Charlie that he was in town for the weekend and wanted to talk. Charlie responded, Anytime tomorrow will be fine. I'll be at the ranch all day. Just come on out. Billy's visit. May 5th, 2018, Saturday, 10:30 a.m. When Billy arrived at Shiloh, Charlie walked down to greet him. Billy's wife, Sherry, was with him. Hey, Billy, what brings you all the way back to God's country? At that point, Claire walked down the steps to introduce herself to Sherry. After a few casual moments, Billy began. I told Sherry that I needed to talk with you, and she wanted to meet you, so we hopped on the plane and headed your way. Well, we are glad you came, Claire responded. Can we offer you a cup of coffee, water, a soft drink? Billy wanted to get straight to the point of his visit. Charlie, I have something very personal and important that I need to say. Sure, Billy, Charlie responded. Why don't we go out on the patio? You boys go ahead, Claire interjected. That will give Sherry and me a chance to get acquainted. As they took their seats on the patio, Billy began. Charlie, I have really wrestled with myself because of the things that Elliot, Zach, and I said to you back in February. Billy, we are friends. Charlie tried to deflect Billy's regret. I certainly hope so, Billy quickly answered, but I still need to clear the air. At the same time, I want to share something that I have discovered over the last couple of months. First and foremost, Billy continued, I was so wrong in so many ways. I'm sorry. I regret my words. No excuses, no explanations, period. Whoa, Billy, Charlie countered. That was a pretty emotional conversation for me. I said some pretty stupid things, and I have a very close friend who spent several days schooling me on my attitude. Hey, I just noticed. Billy changed the subject for a moment. The lesions and plaque on your face is not there like it was before. Have they made any progress on your condition? I really don't know, Charlie answered. Right now, I'm just enjoying the relief. I don't know what's worst, the itching or the pain. It will drive you nuts. I came here to tell you about some things that have rocked my own personal belief system. Billy changed the subject again. Years ago, I was pretty active in the church. When I was in the Navy, I had a chaplain that I considered a good friend. In fact, he was the one who led me to the Lord. But in recent years, I lost touch with him, Billy continued. I suppose you could say I got lazy about my church attendance. I more or less replaced a regular church service with a few TV preachers. I especially like the upbeat, positive messages that make me feel good about myself, Billy continued. These guys did a pretty good job of making you feel like God wanted you to have an easy, prosperous life. One of my favorite preachers was that guy with the large church in Houston. He's always telling us that God wants us to be happy and prosperous. Did you know? Billy asked. That guy lives in a 17,000 square foot house. Anyway, I started thinking about some of the things that your friend Eli said, Billy continued. Charlie, that young man is pretty smart. Eli is a good friend and a good man, Charlie remarked. I'm pretty proud of him. When I got back to San Diego, Billy continued, I got into a pretty deep conversation with my champion friend. He was pretty blunt. He told me, in no uncertain terms, that I needed to stop listening to the garbage from those TV preachers and get back in front of some teachers who actually knew the Bible. He gave me a book about a Vietnam veteran by the name of Cleve McClary. I think I have one of his books, Charlie interjected. He endured a lot of physical trauma and stood strong in his faith. As I recall, he was hit by a grenade and lost an eye and one arm while leading his men in a firefight in Vietnam. This was a good-looking, healthy man, Billy continued the story. He had a beautiful wife and 2 beautiful daughters. Yet, he came home from Nam, severely crippled and half his face gone. He credits Bobby Richardson and Billy Casper, Charlie added, as men who encouraged him to not only live, but to go on to be an inspiration to many others. Lieutenant McClary went through hell, Billy continued, and now he goes around the world telling everyone about his relationship with Christ. He is a man who suffered, and now he uses his painful experience as a platform for the gospel. The fact is, Billy concluded, none of us can speak for God, especially someone like me. God has a purpose for what you are experiencing. You have weathered it a lot better than I ever would. Billy, all of us have to learn about God's purposes, Charlie observed. I lost my own focus. Instead of trusting God, I started questioning his plan for my life. That lying voice in my head started telling me that God was treating me unfairly. Billy, Philippians 1:29 tells us that it has been granted to us, Charlie said, that for the sake of Christ, you should not only believe in him, but also suffer for his sake. The word that got my attention was the word granted. Billy, Paul is telling us we have been given a gift of suffering. Paul makes it sound like a badge of honor, even though we really haven't done anything to deserve it. I seem to remember, Billy noted, there's a passage in 1 Peter chapter 4 where it says that we should rejoice when we experience a fiery trial. I guess I forgot that one when I was assaulting you down at the creek. Billy, Charlie remarked, if you get a chance to read 2 Corinthians 11 chapter, you will hear the Apostle Paul talk about his own trials. He was strong in his faith, and he was serving Christ, but he suffered one trial after another. He was beaten with rods and stoned. 5 times he was beaten with 40 lashes, less one. He was shipwrecked and went for days adrift at sea. He experienced hunger and cold, sleepless nights. God didn't just allow these things to happen to Paul. They were a part of God's plan for Paul's mission in life. Right after that, Charlie went on, he says that God put a thorn in his life. He described it as a messenger of Satan. 3 times he prayed for relief, and God would not remove it. Imagine God using Satan to attack one of his apostles physically. In the end, Paul acknowledged God's purpose for the pain. It was to keep him humble and dependent on God. Billy, Charlie continued, over the past several weeks, I believe I have gained a better understanding of some of God's purposes, but just some. He may or may not ever reveal everything he wants to accomplish for my family and me. To be honest, I think he was working his overall purpose in you, Zach, Elliot, and Eli. Who knows how far and wide his plan and purpose extends? Charlie, Billy interjected, you have said it well. I'm amazed by your perspective. I'm not sure if I could ever get there. If God decides to take you there, Charlie responded, he can and will accomplish his will in your life. It ain't me, my friend. God decided to take me to the woodshed in order to draw me closer to himself. I can't take credit for any of that. Don't be amazed at me. Be amazed at the creator of the universe, who cared enough to engage a Kansas rancher who needed a better vision. 50 years. Margie's Cafe, July 6, 2018, Friday. Margie's Cafe opened its doors on Saturday morning, July 6, 1968. Tonight, it was filled to capacity. It was time for celebration, and everyone wanted to get in on the party. Early in the evening, Mayor Tinker took to the microphone and made a short speech about the importance of this day. Folks, I don't have to tell you how much this town loves Margie Sanderson and her place. Tonight, we celebrate her 50th anniversary feeding this town. We have held many town meetings here, and no doubt, hundreds of important decisions have been made by people sitting around these tables. People conduct business here, hold Bible studies and prayer groups, plan social gatherings, and we talk about life in general. Margie, we love you. At that moment, Dale Manning spoke up from the back of the room. Mr. Mayor, let us hear from Margie. Everyone, including the mayor, laughed out loud. The comment was followed by the crowd chanting, Margie, 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 until the mayor laughed, put up his hand to silence the group. Margie, Mayor Tinker continued, it looks like nobody here wants to listen to a politician today. Why don't you come up here and share a few words? Margie walked up to the mic, and the mayor stepped aside. Look, she began, I am no good at this, but I love each and every one of you, and I appreciate you for what you're trying to do. I'm not about to tell you how old I am, and don't any of you try to guess. My mom and I opened this place 50 years ago, and I've grown old in many of you. Heck, a few of you are responsible for a lot of my gray hair. Most of you know that my granddaughter, Ellen, has been helping me run this cafe ever since my husband, Hank, died 15 years ago. Now it's past time for me to step aside and let Ellen take over. Charlie, Luke, Dale, and the rest of you men in the back, Margie continued, I expect you boys to treat her better than you have me. If you don't, I still know another use for my iron skillets. Yes, ma'am, the men shouted in chorus. As Margie wrapped up her speech, Charlie turned to the others at his table. Do you think she could stay away from this place? Not a chance, Dale answered. One of Charlie's old church friends stopped by Charlie's table for a chat. You guys mind if I pull up a chair? He asked. Not at all, Gary, Charlie answered. I haven't seen you in a long time. How have you been? Gary Morris had served with Charlie on a couple of committees in church several years back. He was also one of the men with whom Charlie had lost contact when his troubles worsened. I heard your skin problem had gotten better, Gary commented. I wanted to stop by and see for myself. Well, Charlie answered, I don't have any official change in my diagnosis, but at least for now, I am enjoying the relief. What did the doctor say? Gary asked. He has no clue, Charlie answered. I had an accident at Crickett's Creek, and a few days later, symptoms started fading. That was a couple of months ago. Doc tells me the accident and the improvement are totally unrelated. The rash and its other related symptoms could start back any day now, but I'm just going to enjoy it while I can. Gary was one of the men who participated in the rebuilding of Charlie's barn after the fire. He also helped in the aftermath of the tornado. But after the funerals of Charlie's children, and like so many of Charlie's other friends, he stopped coming around. Charlie, I'm sorry that I haven't stopped by to check on you, Gary continued. I know you and Claire have been going through some really tough times. How is Claire? No need to apologize, Charlie replied. Claire is doing pretty well. She beat breast cancer. Now she is raising 5 kids, 6 if you include me. It is appointed for man to grow old, but nowhere is it written that we have to grow up, right? Gary laughed. Are you having any success rebuilding the ranch and your herd? It's all in God's timing, Charlie answered. The past year has not been too bad. Claire is a genius with budget. She knows how to stretch a dollar. We have managed to increase the numbers enough to hire some help around the ranch and still clear enough to eat. It might take a few years, Charlie continued, but we are going to keep working the best that we can and try to trust God with the results. In the meantime, my main focus is on making sure these kids are well fed and healthy. That will be enough for me. I'm enjoying the respite from the disease, and if or when it comes back, I will deal with it the best way I can. When Gary excused himself to interact with others, Luke leaned over to Charlie. That was odd, don't you think? How do you mean? Charlie asked. He calls himself a friend, Luke responded, but he disappeared when you and Claire were in the middle of your most challenging time. That just doesn't sit well with me. That doesn't bother me now, Charlie answered, although it troubled me before. People deal with trials in the best way they know how. When we had that fire, Gary jumped right in, but after a few more incidents, he started getting uncomfortable around us. Some people are like that. I can't hold that against him or anyone else. It makes me appreciate guys like you, Jack, Chris, Dale, and a few others even more. Charlie expressed his appreciation. As the battles wear on, your best friends draw near, and your casual friends do the best they can. Maybe so. Jack was the best of the best. We are certainly missing him, Luke answered. Right now, it's getting late, and this old cowboy is ready to crash, Charlie announced. If I can wrestle Claire away from Rita and Tina, we're getting out of here. Broken Spur, July 13th, 2018, Friday. Rita Graham and her attorney, Paul Kellerman, arrived at Shiloh around 3 o'clock p.m. to meet with Charlie and Claire. Charlie, Claire, Rita began. I believe you already know Paul. He was Jack's attorney. Hey, Paul, Charlie responded. Nice to see you again. To what do we owe the pleasure? As they sat down at the dining room table, Paul brought out 2 rather large files and laid them on the table. Charlie, Rita asked me to meet so we can cover 2 important but unrelated issues, Paul began. One thing is that we need to go over the estate and get some legal documents out of the way, and the other involved a potential real estate opportunity. Okay, I'll bite, Charlie responded. I'm not sure how we are involved, but you know we are ready to help out in any way we can. Charlie, Rita spoke up, you and Claire have been so helpful since Jack's death. You were like a younger brother to him. I told Paul earlier that you seemed to be unaware of what Jack and I decided to do. That's why I asked Paul to join us today. Charlie, Paul asked, have you even read Jack's letter to you? What letter? Charlie was perplexed. Didn't Pastor Pete give you a letter at Jack's funeral? Rita asked. Oh, Rita. Charlie was surprised. I am so sorry. I guess my mind was racing so many places at the time. I didn't realize it was from Jack. What did you do with it, Charlie? Claire asked. It may still be in my coat pocket. I haven't worn that coat since the funeral, Charlie offered, placing his hands over his face. Claire went upstairs to retrieve the envelope as Charlie's eyes began to water. Rita, I am so sorry. Charlie continued his confused apology. Dear Charlie, Jack's handwritten note began. If you're reading this, I suppose it's because I've already met the Lord. You are like a little brother to me. We have shared many years together as friends and as partners in this lifestyle. You allowed me to be Uncle Jack to your kids and allowed them to share their lives with Rita and me. The same goes for your grandchildren. Rita and I don't have any heirs of our own. we would like your family to share in our legacy. Rita is a beautiful life partner, but she is going to need help after I'm gone. I'm asking and trusting you to help her going forward. I have no doubt that you will. We also decided that we want you and Claire to have the Lone Wolf Ranch. Build it and take care of it for the sake of those children. Paul Kellerman has all of the paperwork, but what we want to do is have you share the ranch with Rita while she is still living. And then it will belong to you and your family. I love you, Charlie. I know that we will be reunited again as brothers in the presence of Christ. Your friend, Jack. As Charlie read the last part of Jack's letter, he was reduced to tears. Would you give me a few minutes? Charlie asked as he walked out of the room to regain his composure. Charlie walked out of his back porch. He leaned against one of the posts and cried out a whisper. Lord Jesus, I don't know what to think or how to even interpret this. I'm tired of the struggle. I am grateful that you sent Jack into my life, but Lord, I would much rather have him back by my side as my friend and partner in the fight. God, I don't know what to say. How do I respond to Rita? I don't deserve this. This is their ranch. They built it. Give me clarity. Help me to sort this out. Charlie walked back into the room. Rita, Paul, I'm not thinking very clearly right now. I didn't see this coming. Rita, I hope you know that I will always be here to support you and help you through this difficult time. Charlie? Rita interrupted. You know how much Jack and I love you and Claire and your entire family. Jack and I talked about this for a long time before he wrote you that letter. At this moment, there's a lot for you to digest. Let's just take it one step at a time. Rita, Claire interjected. This is incredibly gracious of you and Jack. I'm just as overwhelmed as Charlie. You have been part of our family for a very long time. That will never change. Charlie, Paul offered, you guys can sort out the practical and emotional sides of things a little bit at a time. For the moment, there are some legal documents that need to be signed and some tax-related details that will need to be addressed. I can leave these documents with you to review, or we can go over them now. As Jack's lawyer, I have a job to do. I hope you understand. Of course, Charlie answered. I'm sure they are fine. If you could give me a couple of days to look them over, we can get that part of this behind us. You said you had 2 reasons for the visit, Claire observed. Is this second one going to be a shock too? No, Paul answered. It's just an opportunity. Rita wants to make a clear decision, but she is still grieving and doesn't trust her own judgment. When you consider the estate issue, she really feels that you are in the best position to look at it. As you may already know, Paul continued, Dan Prager owns the Broken Spur Ranch next to the Lone Wolf, and he has decided to sell his operation, including livestock and equipment. I had heard, Charlie responded. He has some health issues, and his children are not really interested in running a ranch. He and I have talked a few times over the past couple of years. I knew he was thinking about it, but I never discussed it further because Claire and I are not in a position to look at buying his place. Dan has put together a package of information, Paul continued. I would like to leave it with you to look over. His ranch is considerably smaller than Shiloh. It's around 900 acres, but the boundary lines match up very well with Jack and Rita's place and will line up pretty well across the road from yours. Rita, Charlie asked, you guys are around 1,600 acres, I believe. That would expand you to 2,500 acres altogether. When you consider Shiloh in the mix, Rita answered, you're looking at around 5,300 acres, Charlie. But I can't manage that kind of property. You already have the expertise. Charlie, Paul offered. Jack left Rita with some life insurance proceeds that will cover a large part of the initial payment on the land. What we need to figure out is if we can take what Dan has built and fold it in with current operations and see if it is feasible before he takes his property to the market. Wow, Charlie responded. That's a lot to digest. Claire and Rita both have a good grasp of the financial side of things. I certainly think that it is worth looking at. I would like to talk to Dan in order to get a better understanding of his operation. If it makes sense, we can put together a plan. Rita, how do you feel about it? Charlie asked. Honestly, Charlie, Rita responded, I don't have a firm opinion either way. Dan seems to be a man of integrity. I don't think he will lie to us. I had a good relationship with his wife, Tess, until she died a couple of years ago. I do think it is worth our time to look at it. Then we will get to work, Charlie answered, and we will pray that God will direct our decision. Charlie's legacy. Charlie, Claire, and Rita decided that the Broken Spur would make a great addition to their combined ranches. After consummating the sale, they were left with a total of 5,300 acres on 3 contiguous properties. Together, they were able to see exponential growth in the number of cattle, horses, and bulls on their ranch. They worked together for another 8 years until Rita's death at the age of 79. Brother Doug died at the age of 95, having fulfilled God's purpose in his life and in the life of Charlie Christian. The last time Charlie felt the itching, painful symptoms of his incurable disease was in 2018, more than 34 years ago. His doctors never offered an explanation. Charlie held on to the belief that the answer was in the ice-cold waters of Crickett's Creek. Charlie and Claire Christian celebrated their 70th wedding anniversary on August 30th, 2052. Claire died the following day, leaving a legacy of loving sacrifice for her husband and 5 grandchildren. As her funeral concluded, Hannah slipped her arm under Charlie's arm. Granddaddy, I love you so much. Let me walk you back to your car. I love you, sweetheart, Charlie answered. If it's all right with you, I would like to sit for a while. Grandma and I would like to have a little time to ourselves. As everyone moved down the hill to the house, Charlie took his seat on the old stone bench overlooking the graves of his family. Charlie wept, but his tears were a mixture of grief, peace, and joy. He grieved for his partner in life. He felt the peace that only God can provide, and he felt the joy of knowing that the woman he loved so much had finished well. Out of their 70 years of marriage, both of them had experienced what Apostle Paul described as a momentary light affliction during a series of trials that brought them to the brink of despair. It was only to the brink and not beyond. God still maintained a hedge around both of them that was bounded by his love and his purpose. Satan had no victory in their lives. Their trials lasted more than 9 long years, but their afflictions lasted only 9 years. In those years, 2 people found intimacy in the arms of a loving and sovereign God. Charlie looked at the graves of his family and lifted up a prayer of thanksgiving. Dear God, how precious is it to know that everyone buried here is in your presence right now for all eternity. I don't know how long you have planned for me, but I have confidence that I will see them again. Like you said in 1 Corinthians 13, right now I can only see through the glass darkly, for I only know in part, but one day soon I will see you face to face, and I will also see them the same way. Thank you for blessing me with them, and thank you for ripping the scales off my eyes so many years ago in a way that enabled me to see and feel your presence in such an intimate way. Amen. Charlie looked over at the urn that held the ashes of his beautiful friend Bandit. Bandit, we sat up here and talked for more than 14 years. You were always willing to listen. Some preachers don't believe that dogs go to heaven, but I'm convinced that I will see you there. No matter what I went through, you loved Claire and me until the end. I still love you, buddy. Charlie turned to his bride. Sweetheart, what can I say about the blessing of 70 years with a life partner like you? I can only remember a few verses from Proverbs 31, but they apply to you. An excellent wife who can find. You are far more precious than jewels. Strength and dignity were your clothing. You opened your mouth with wisdom, and the teaching of kindness was always on your tongue. You looked well to the ways of our household. Now your children and their children's children rise up and call you blessed. Many women have done excellently, but you surpassed them all. You owned the heart of your husband, and you were so good to me all of my life. You were strong and assertive, yet you were a humble servant to everyone you loved. When I look back over the years and the legacy of your life, I see this family and your influence and teaching running through their lives. We have Noah, our eldest grandson, who left home to graduate with honors from the Air Force Academy. He and his wife Sandy gave us 3 wonderful great-grandsons, Matthew, James, and Samuel. Abby went on to marry John Edwards. Do you remember when we didn't think he would ever amount to anything? Now he is the missions pastor at our church, and Abby is raising 4 beautiful children. At the same time, she and Hannah are running Shiloh. Of course, we can't forget that Abby is a K-State grad in livestock management, just like her granddaddy. When I think about Abby and Hannah, I am amazed at what they have done for our ranch. God blessed this ranch after we took in Jack's ranch and added Dan Prager's place. I thought it might be more than we could handle, but now we are sitting on 9,400 acres, and Abby and Hannah have been there every step of the way. Charlie paused for a moment to gather his thoughts. Hannah and Roy are good parents too. Simon, Marcy, Kelly, and Mark are in their early teens now. All of them are smart, and all of them know the Lord. Leah surprised us both. First, she went into veterinary medicine and graduated with honors. Then she married Tom Brooks. I knew his dad, and I was a bit skeptical at first, but I remember you telling me to give him a chance. You were right. He has been a great dad to Rachel, Lindy, Peter, Logan, and Elizabeth. He and Leah have done a beautiful job renovating Jack and Rita's old house, don't you think? We were so excited when Benji met and married Diana. They are a great couple. I think it's neat that he married a girl whose name means eternal blossom. Claire, as I sit here grieving for the love of my life, I can also see you standing in the presence of Jesus himself. I look at the grave surrounding yours, and I know that you are seeing all of them again for the first time in many years. Please tell Doug, Jack, Cody, and Rita that I missed them. For now, I can only see through the glass of a dark mirror, but I know that you are on the other side of that mirror, and you can see clearly now what I long to see. I guess I need to make my way back down the hill now. I don't want Hannah to get worried. In my younger days, I would jump on Harley's back and ride alongside my buddy Bandit. I sure hope there are horses and dogs in heaven. Charlie Christian died on June 3rd, 2053. It was his 93rd birthday.